So just a little introduction about myself, because I would like this to be as helpful to you as possible. I am a licensed psychologist and have worked over 20 years in addiction, chronic mental illness, homelessness, and trauma. So we're going to look at some of that today. And one of the goals out of this is that anyone, no matter what your experience, you can come away with some gold nuggets, some tools you can use with a lot of people that you might encounter that have either mental illness or addiction and other behavior problems that could be scary if you didn't have some context for it. So I'm going to give you a lot of information in a short period of time, but I think you'll be able to walk away and use it. And something I love is if you can walk away and teach it. So if this information is valuable and you can use it, who can you share it with? And now we have some multiplication happening with more people having resources as we go in our community. So I'll get started. I am at East County Transitional Living Center as the CEO there. We have 540 beds, and Feeding San Diego is a huge reason why we can survive. Our chefs down here, and a lot of our meals, which is $400,000 a year, is because of Feeding San Diego, so we're very grateful. We also have a drug rehab program and counseling centers and a university, so a lot of things to bring as much help to the community as we can. And we love our partners, and Feeding San Diego, don't tell others, might definitely be our favorite. So we'll kind of start, and I want you to think of your worst case scenario. And what I mean by that is whether you're a volunteer or it's your job, or you show up and here you go to give back to your community in a very special way, whether that's actually handing out food or any other position you may have. One training I did, it was a lady at the front desk. So people would come in and that's who they would meet at the very beginning. And she had a worst case scenario with somebody coming in who was psychotic and yelling at her, blaming her, and saying terrible racist comments toward her. And at that moment, she felt trapped. She didn't know how to get out of the situation. So she had a worst case scenario. Now, she was fine, everybody was safe, and it all worked out. But she thought at that moment, I need more tools. What do I do if I get in a position where I have no idea what I'm supposed to do? And even in our situation, sometimes we have people that are not necessarily trained to work with mental health individuals, and yet everybody we come in contact has some difficulty. Sometimes we have the same difficulty. Those who are volunteers and those who are even paid have a history, and we come with mental illness as well as addiction and other background trauma difficulties. So how can we all be trained? I want you to think of your worst case scenario, and some of you are far apart, so you might not be able to do this. So if you want to engage others, I want you to tell the person your worst case scenario. I usually have people screaming out, but that might be hard in this setting, so I want you to turn around and tell the person your worst case scenario. What are you afraid of? What could you imagine would be very overwhelming that you would be really intimidated to handle? And actually, I'm just going to go have you scream it out because we're small enough. Anybody want to share? You know, something that you have experienced where you thought, I have no idea what to do. You're waving a flag, somebody rescue me, I don't know what to say or do. Or, you know, you have fear, like you come and you're a bit nervous and you're like, what if? Anybody want to share? Yes?
I think so.
Okay, he jumped to a real worst case scenario. You know, what if somebody is threatening violence? You know, that is extremely scary. That's top of the list on worst case scenarios. What do? You know, and there's ways to prevent, which is kind of what we'll focus on today, because you don't want to be in scenarios like that. So what do you do to protect yourself ahead of time? Anybody else? Worst case scenario? Yes? Okay, so somebody suicidal, when you are not trained, when you are trained and you've done it for 20 years, it's scary. You know, you feel like you have somebody's life in your hand. Oh no, if I don't handle this well, where is this going? So suicide, top of the list for sure. But even if you just you're doing what you sometimes are volunteering tons of hours because you care about society, and then somebody's yelling at you, I don't want to be here, and why are you doing that? And like, what? How come I'm getting this, you know? So you could have just people that are unhappy with you helping, and that can be frustrating. Anybody else? Worst case scenario? Yep. And this happens, right? Bodily fluids, that's got to be high on the list of worst case scenarios. You know, you can worry about your safety. You can worry about, your family. If you have a family, so you're going here, you're volunteering, you're experiencing something. What if, what if worst case scenario? So all of these are great points, and we're going to get to some of the tools for kind of prevention and what you can do. So first of all, we're going to look at mental illness. And, there's conflict of even me saying that out loud. There's lots of struggles people have, and I see them on a spectrum. All of us could deal with depression, anxiety, some of these things to some level, and then some more than others. And there's also a model where, with mental illness, it could be seen as a disease. And that's something that people don't choose. There's various reasons why they end up having it, but in the end, it could be a battle the rest of their life, even if they're proactively trying to manage their symptoms. So these are just a few. There's more, but these are the big ones. Anybody know what schizophrenia, what would have you identify, oh, this person might have schizophrenia? What do you think of? Yes? Hallucinations, hearing things, seeing things, feeling tactile, feeling things that are not there. Okay? We would see that as schizophrenia. Depression, everybody's familiar with this. We probably have all experienced it, or people close to us have, but have you gotten it to the point where you don't want to wake up in the morning, you stay in your bed, you don't want to take care of your physical hygiene anymore? Depression. Bipolar, anybody know what bipolar is? I know Jonathan knows. Anybody want to try? Bipolar. What do you think of when you think of, oh, that person must be bipolar? We use it all the time. Okay, it could be that. Yep. Highs and lows. So because that's where the personality changes. They go manic and they're top of the world. They're invincible. They're the most amazing thing ever. They can do things. They have special powers. It ranges on what this looks like, but a manic episode, they have a lot of energy and a lot of great things come to them. Not to others around them, but to them. And then they have the depression, where they might get so bad as to be suicidal. And so you have these ups and downs, usually in chunks, where depending on the day they're walking into you, if you have them on a manic, you're going to experience something different than if they're very depressed. I think everybody has an idea of anxiety, right? Even if they just think of it as stress, and then we take it out farther, and we've probably seen people stressed out in a moment with us, where they're very anxious, and it's hard for them to even talk. Personality disorders, this is an interesting one. This is where it grows with the person. A lot of times there's trauma there. It grows with the person as part of who they are in a lot of ways. There's controversy on that, but that's how it's been seen for a lot of years. And in that, you could probably recognize terms like narcissist, where they think they are the most amazing thing, God's gift to earth, to everybody, and they truly believe it. And then you'll hear people call people narcissists, and for some reason, everybody's partner's narcissist nowadays. So that's a term used a lot, right? And then you have borderline personality, and that's, sometimes people confuse bipolar with borderline. Bipolar is high, high, low, low. Borderline is whoop, 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 whoop. And it's because they have no internal kind of security of who they are. So if somebody treats them well, they love them, they're their best friend. Somebody says no to them, they hate them, they're the worst enemy. Okay? So borderline personality disorder. And this is going to be in our population. It's very common, but in our population, it's going to be a lot more common. ADHD, I think we're all familiar with this, right? But what would be some of the classic signs you may, okay, this person may be struggling with ADHD. What's the first thing that comes to your mind?
Concentration,
Problems with focusing and concentration. Addiction. How many people already in your position with Feeding San Diego have dealt with addiction in your population you're dealing with? Yeah, if you haven't yet, you will. Okay? We're going to talk today about how core of why people end up homeless is addiction, mental illness, and trauma. These things are a huge factor. Obviously, it's hard to live in San Diego for anyone. So housing costs and socioeconomic status, all of this is a big factor as well. But you'll find rooted issues, and addiction's a big one. Maybe they were homeless and they turned to using drugs or alcohol to cope, or they were using drugs and alcohol and lost everything and ended up homeless. But this is a story you'll see often. So addiction's a big piece of this. And then PTSD, you might have those reactions to you when it has nothing to do with you. It has to do with a trauma they experienced previously, okay? Now here's an interesting one. I think we can understand addiction. We can understand depression. I don't think we realize what it looks like when you come from trauma. And what I mean by trauma, everybody goes through trauma, but if you have a childhood where you have significant trauma, that can be physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, that can be actually your parents going through divorce. It doesn't have to be a trauma, but for many it is when you're a kid. And many kids blame themselves. If you're raised in a home where your parent is an alcoholic or addicted to drugs, these are things that we call adverse childhood experiences. And it's not just that these things are trauma, they change the brain development of a person in such a way to put them at higher risk to be an addict later, higher risk to be involved in domestic violence, higher risk to be homeless. So our population we work with, we're gonna probably see a history of trauma, and here's some of the symptoms. You could accidentally think the person is schizophrenic or bipolar or an addict, when truly the deep core part of it is that they had trauma and they're reacting because of that in front of you, and it looks like other things. So look at the list of symptoms of trauma: aggression, rage, volatile relationships, hypervigilance, which is when you're on edge and you feel like somebody's gonna get you at any moment. We might have these. We might come from a background of trauma. Impulsivity, hopelessness, poor social skills, low self-esteem, difficulty concentrating. I think many people are diagnosed with ADHD when nobody addressed the history of trauma. And if they heal from trauma, they can concentrate. And they are not truly biologically ADHD. So this is good to remember when you're talking to a person and you think you know what's going on. Quite possibly they come from a background of trauma. And what this can produce in us is compassion in the moment also, and how to slow down, and we're gonna look at that with the tools, instead of reacting quick, which could backfire, because that trauma response will be, okay? And so you wanna be calm and give them a chance to stay calm to address the situation. If you react fast, you're gonna make it worse, and we'll talk about why and what you're gonna do with it. So this is what I want you to understand is happening. So you're gonna take your thumb and you're gonna stick it in your hand, okay? This is deep inside your brain. It's the amygdala, the limbic system. This is what they call the emotional center of the brain. And it is what comes first in development, all the raw, strong emotions. And then if you bring your fingers down and you cover that up, these are your wrinkles in your good thinking brain, your prefrontal cortex, that make sense of the world, okay? So all your good knowledge and everything you learned healthy later on in life, but the core deep stuff that happened in childhood with all those strong emotions is still there, and you're covering it up. And you could think of a 2-year-old. If they wanted their way, how they might throw a tantrum to get it. But when you're an adult, you go, calm down, you don't need to be stomping and yelling and throwing a fit, you're an adult. And we have our good thinking brain to calm us down and have us look like an adult. But what if we don't? Have you ever seen a 30-year-old or a 40-year-old throwing a tantrum like a kid? That's because if we have that trauma sitting there and it has not been handled and dealt with properly, it's sitting there waiting to be triggered. When it's triggered, you flip your lid and all those raw emotions from the past come out, and you may get them. So if you don't know how to deal with trauma, here you are, you're handing out food, you're answering the phones, you're walking down the street trying to help people, whatever position you're in and whatever you're doing. If you come up with somebody and you say something that triggers them, you might get an explosion of anger, of yelling, whatever it may be, and it has nothing to do with you. It has to do with something you said or the feel of the air or the location or the smell, all the senses involved trigger that memory, and they're reacting to you from what happened many years ago. So the good thing is, knowing that, you don't have to take it personal. Somebody volunteering or working to your right or to your left could all of a sudden yell at you and hate you for a moment, and it has nothing to do with you. Or they could love you and think you're the best thing ever, and it has nothing to do with you. It's going back to childhood and early experiences. So this is just something to be aware of as we get into the tools. Here's how it happens in the brain. Early childhood experiences, what we call negative experiences, adverse childhood experiences, physical abuse, sexual abuse, parents going to prison, these kind of things that really rock a child's world. They mess it up. Their brain can't make sense of it. That messes with their brain development. It changes and impairs their social, relationship, and emotional, and how they think, cognitive development. Then they end up doing stupid stuff. They adopt at-risk behavior. They end up in problem situations. They end up in addiction. They end up messing up their liver and their heart and everything else, and all the way to early death. They're going to be at higher risk for a lot of other difficulties in adult life. Good thing is now we know how to heal all this. We can't get into all of it today, but there's a lot of hope to heal past trauma and the brain to be repaired. One of the best things for that, I'm gonna have you guess. What's one thing a person could have in their life that could repair past problems in the brain, past trauma? Any idea what one thing might be that could help repair? Yes, what do you think? How did you steal that? Have you heard me speak before? She's just very wise. That is the correct answer. Usually I get a few really good answers, but not the one I'm looking for, and she nailed it first time out. So healthy relationships, because that was what was missing in the early development. So when you, as an adult, have healthy relationships, what that's doing to your brain is actually repairing. And so that's a good hope to give people that are like, oh my gosh, I just ruined my children. And I have this is me. What do I do? Find and build and spend energy on healthy relationships, and you'll be surprised how far you can go in healing. Quick things, this is all scientifically proven or demonstrated out of repeated studies, initially started through Kaiser, called the ACE study. You can look it up and find lots of information on it. It was in the 90s. One of the greatest reasons we loved it is because it didn't study trapped people. We're at UCSD, they study trapped people. People in prison, people, maybe in a mental health institution, students, that's the easier way to study often. It's hard to get a very big population with a lot of variety. So Kaiser was looking for health consequences for childhood trauma, but what they found was everything else. And this is what we've used to understand how the brain works, and we've used to understand trauma. So adverse childhood will increase your risk for traumatic brain injury, depression, suicide, anxiety, unintended pregnancies, HIV, STDs, cancer, alcohol abuse, and education problems, difficulty getting jobs. There's 24 key factors where it's significantly going to put you at risk for these in adult life if you have trauma. This is what we're looking at in the population we work with. I'm trying to keep on time. Okay, so here are some do's and don'ts quickly for kind of any population, but definitely those that deal with mental illness and addiction. This is really going to help you. Do's and don'ts, and these are two sides of the coin, and you can have this PowerPoint and go back to it later if you'd like. Number one, don't rush or react. Remember we talked about that amygdala, the emotions all coming out? That's called the fight or flight response. Who's heard of the fight or flight response? Everybody now, right? COVID just taught the world, okay? Everybody knows about the fight or flight now. And so that's what we're talking about is if you let that system get activated, you're not gonna have a clear thinking brain. So you got to stay calm. You can't let yourself get caught in the moment and stress out and overreact. You got to stay calm. Stay calm, cool, and collected. Don't engage psychosis. So if you're there and you think a person is probably having psychosis, probably because they say the government's out to get them and they've been followed and you're poisoning them. There's a lot of things that come out through schizophrenia and bipolar that's paranoid, and they might think that you're involved in the military and the government and God. You know, there's themes to some of the psychosis. So if you're hearing that, it's important not to actually engage the psychosis. Don't say, I don't see anybody there. What are you talking about? I haven't seen anybody follow you. That's not true. If you engage the psychosis, could you imagine what happens? You become part of it. Oh, you're working for the government. Okay? Don't address the psychosis. Address what you know is true. If they're super stressed and scared because the government's following them, you seem very scared right now. How can we help you feel safe? They're really scared. Whether the psychosis is real or not, they're really scared. Go to what you know is true and address that and work on a solution. How can I help you feel safe right now? Don't address the psychosis. Don't take it personal. Everything I talked about at the beginning, you know it's not personal. It has nothing to do with you. I have some of the things people have said, you know, they will attack you because of your gender, because of your ethnicity, your age, and they'll just say really mean things. It has nothing to do with you. Either they're scared to death of being in a healthy situation and they're sabotaging themselves. That happens all the time. Or they're having psychosis, or you remind them of somebody from their past. Whatever the case, very typically, probably every time, but I can't ever promise guarantees, most of the time it has nothing to do with you. Something else going on. Don't take it personal. Think, what else could it be? Avoid blame and shame. You're going to validate with a twist. So whatever they're saying or doing, you might be thinking, oh my goodness, like what is happening right now? You might think, talk about bodily fluids. I'm not going to say it because it's just too gross, but I've definitely experienced a lot of terrible things. And in your mind, you're like, oh, wow, how is this happening? But that does not help anything if that's on your face, right? We talk about having a game face. So whatever is happening, do not judge or shame them. It's never helpful. It just isn't. So you go, interesting. Okay. You stay calm. I understand you're going through a lot. Let me figure out how to help you. You want to validate whatever's going on with them, but you might twist it. Let me see what I can do. You stay here. I'm going to go get some help. You know, you don't want to be in a bad situation. You don't want to put yourself in jeopardy, but you want them to feel safe, accepted, cared about, while you go figure out what else you're going to do. So be careful not to put any judgment or shame on them. Don't panic, okay? Best way to not panic is to know your team, so plan ahead. I don't know how far I'll be able to get with the slides. There's a lot of information I'd like to give you. So I think it's later, but I'll put it here. Have a game plan ahead of time with your team. So do you have an emergency protocol? Do you know who's your backup? So if something's going on and you know what you're supposed to do or who you're supposed to call, it's a lot easier not to panic. Don't enter power struggles. For this, I'll go to teenagers, okay? I didn't, yes, you know. What is the point? Okay, so you know not to go into a power struggle with teenagers. They will win. Same thing with the population we will work with. There is no point. So you go, yes, okay, sure, no problem. Yep, give me a moment. Just agree. There may be more to that story. You're going to come back later and you're thinking like, no, but yes, okay, I understand. You want that? Sure, let me see what I could do. Give me a moment. Just agree. Okay, you think I'm poisoning you? Give me a moment. Let me find somebody else for you just a moment. Don't go battle head to head trying to say something, prove something. It's not going to be helpful. Just agree and go get other support to figure out what you're going to do next. Deep breathing, self-talk. What's this one? Let me see how I can help you. Remember that phrase, memorize it. hold on just one moment, let me see how I can help you. Now really you're running to somebody, oh no, you gotta help me, this is insane, what's going on? But to them, sure, no problem, let me see how I can help you. And then you go get backup support. Don't isolate. There are many times something happens where your gut goes, I messed up, I shouldn't have said that, let me just be quiet and hope this all goes away, and let me not tell anybody because I feel like an idiot, how did I do that? I don't care what's happening, don't isolate. Get somebody else involved. Tell somebody. Don't be embarrassed. As soon as you tell somebody, they're gonna go, oh yeah, that happened to me 5 times. It's fine. Keep others involved, don't isolate. Who else can you get involved? Don't accuse, ask questions. If you go accusing, you'll lose quick. You know, so if you did this and you did that, and that's how come I did this, and it could all be true, you've already lost. So instead of coming in accusing, ask more questions. Try to get more out of them. That builds rapport because you don't know what's happening next. So ask more questions, get information from them. Certain ones are my favorite, like don't panic, don't rush. And what we do a lot of times, it feels similar to survival. So I don't know if you've ever watched those survival shows and all that stuff. And you know, they only have so many resources. And right when that crisis happens, if they rush, they break their ankle, and now they've got, weeks on a broken ankle to figure out how to survive. So never rush, and then you only have so many resources. So you could think survival mode, where you take a deep breath, you analyze, you look around, you see your resources, who else is nearby that could help. So survival is something I think we could tie into some of these tools that we're learning. Yes? No. Unless they're real. What you're doing is engaging psychosis, and it is highly likely you will become part of it. And you want to be very disconnected from the internal world they're experiencing. So when psychosis is happening, you see things, hear things, feel things that are real to that person. So when you have senses, it's not an immediate thing. Information registers how our eyes and our ears and everything work, and it activates and it interprets in a whole nother part of the brain, and then gives you the picture of what you see or the sound. The only thing that goes directly to our brain is smell. Everything else is an interpretation, which is why you can't count on eyewitness testimony sometimes, because everybody sees it a bit different. Right? So that part of the brain that's giving the picture of what they see is really working. There's just no stimuli activating it. It's getting activated all by itself for other reasons. So because of that, you don't want to enter that. That is something happening internally. You want to stay outside, and you want to bring them outside. So I think I probably have this on the next slide, but one of my favorite examples, I was in a crisis house, and the person was psychotic, but they were managing fine. As I'm having a conversation, I could tell they're going deeper into psychosis, and they're getting worked up and stressed. And so I just said, oh, wow, I like your shoes. Are those new? And it pulled him out of the psychosis, and he goes, yeah, I just got them. So bringing them out of the internal world that is not real to external. So if you stay outside and you engage in what is real, you have them touch something, have them hear something, have them smell something. These types of things, bring them out of that internal world into external. That's going to protect you. Okay? All right. Best strategies for responding. Here's the goal. This is what I want you to remember. Learn to recognize warning signs. Can anybody guess some good warning signs where you go, hey, maybe this is going somewhere I need to be ready for? What are some classic warning signs? Yes? Pacing. You have worked with crisis, haven't you? Yeah. Pacing. Okay, that's a big one. The only time I was ever physically harmed in my profession, I've worked with a lot of very extremely extreme populations, was the guy was pacing beforehand. So it was obviously he was escalating. In that situation, it wasn't that bad, but in that situation, he was having psychosis, and so he didn't see me anymore, We had a good rapport. He saw whatever he saw. And he was yelling at me as if, I was something else. And I walked toward him and he came forward and pushed me. And when I backed away, he backed away and we called the police. But in that moment, that was something I distinctly remember, is that he was pacing. He had stopped taking his medication, and he was doing that in a secret way, and he was getting very agitated. You could tell he was bothered, and he was pacing. Very key. What else? What can you think of would be, and I know I wouldn't let Jonathan give the good ones out, but you can jump in this one if you want. What would be signs that a crisis might occur, that you should be prepared, something's going down soon? Anybody else? Yes. Okay, so you're hearing language, you're hearing, I want to die, which people might say, and that's shocking enough, but they say, I am just looking at that freeway thinking, what if I just walked in front of a car? What if, they might say stuff and all your red flags are going up. Okay, we got a problem. We got to intervene quick. That's a red flag. What else? Silence. I'm going to say a shift in normal. So if they're usually talkative and now they're silent. If they're usually silent and now they're talkative, okay? What's going on here? Are they using drugs? Are they having a mental break of some sort? Why the change, the drastic change? Silence is probably a clue for all of us. All of us have kids like, wait, it's way too quiet. Something's going on. Anybody else? Yep, they might yell. And how many have you seen that are yelling to no one? So you can tell they're starting to increase their psychosis. They're yelling and nobody's there and they're upset. And that you can hear the repetitive things they're saying. And like, oh no, it's building. One more and then we'll keep going. Yes?
Isolation, hygiene.
Hygiene, isolation, yes. So especially if you've known them and they're fine typically, but today they're not. If somebody's not taking care of their normal hygiene, that's a key. Maybe they're homeless, that's a difficulty already, but maybe they're depressed and they're not taking care of themselves more. So these are great warning signs. You want to watch body language in a room, okay? You want to know where everybody's at, how they're holding their body. You want to know if somebody is getting bothered by another person. You want to be keyed in on all that interaction. You're not just doing your job. You are doing your job and you got your eyes out, eyes out, eyes out. What's going on over here? That guy's isolating. What's going on over here? They're pacing. They just changed. This guy's looking like something's going down. What is happening? You want to be very aware so you catch it ahead of time. Game face, we talked about this. This is so great. This is the secret weapon of counselors. Could you imagine if you have a past and you say all your deep, dark secrets to somebody and they go, it'll be terrible. So counselors have to have a game face. You can't show some reaction. That's just mean, right? So we got to get good at that. Like, oh, interesting. That's very valuable to a person because whatever's going on, you're not showing any kind of strong emotion that will cause problems. So you want to practice your game face. Whether somebody says something, does something, smells a certain way, whatever is going on, you got a game face. And that takes tact. I think you should practice it. I think you should talk to other people and say, hey, I want you to watch my game face, see how I do. There's some that you go, come on, everything you're thinking is on your face. And it's a lot of work to practice. Interesting, okay? You just stay calm, practice that game face, record yourself. It could be fun. If you can have a game face, this will be a protection. Now, they might still say something or do something, but it's not because you are drawing it out of them. Does that make sense? If you have a certain face that might make it worse, you don't want that. Game face. Body language and tone of voice. And you can Google all this. Go on YouTube, watch some videos. There's great stuff out there. I've got other videos if you want to watch. But how you hold yourself. And what you want to do is watch how they're holding themselves too. So if they get big and they're coming towards you, you might back away and stay calm. You are watching to see how they respond. If you walk toward them and it seems to be making it worse, you back away, okay? And hey, Bob, Have a code word, so you're watching your body mannerisms and you're engaging with people, okay? So when you're going to have to just kind of practice and see how it goes, but there are some times to back away, even sit. If you sit, then you're very non-threatening and they could calm down and feel safe and be okay. There's sometimes you need to get really big. If they're drinking and they're yelling and they seem violent, I distinctly remember a time, I was full of it, okay, I couldn't do nothing, but I tried. I stood up, you need to leave now. You need to leave now. And that was because I thought we were physically in danger and that person needed to leave before anybody else was harmed. So there's times where you are firm and you point and you direct immediately, right now. And you have to have a game face there because you're going to pretend like you can pull it off when you have no, I need you to leave right now. I need you, and you say it again. Or you're sitting down and you say, have a seat. Tell me what's going on. You're calm, you're interacting, you're trying to get more of the story. What's going on? Why are they so agitated? Watch your body language, watch your tone of voice, record yourself, listen back to it, because maybe you don't know how you sound. I don't know how many people, I'm like, look, you are intense, and I'm not trying to be intense. Well, you come across intense. Get other people's feedback or record yourself so you can really hone this in. Engage senses. Remember I told you this with schizophrenia in particular, but trauma can take you to another world too, right? So if somebody's triggered with trauma, they're back when they're 5 years old, they're back when they're in their teens, there's some other place, and it's not good. And we want them here and now with us in a good, safe place. Engaging senses can bring them back. Here, eat this piece of chocolate. It's delicious, it's my favorite. Okay? Now they're tasting. For that moment, they're here and now. Therapists are very impressive. I don't know how, I did an hour-long session. I was the client with the potato chip. Okay, it was delicious, but it's all about mindfulness. One potato chip, how does it look? How does it smell? How does it taste? It was the barbecue potato chip. It was fantastic. The whole point is that mindfulness, and that helps for you to stay calm, but with people you're dealing with, taste, see, smell, feel. If you engage those senses, it pulls them out for wherever they are to here and now, which hopefully is a good place, a safe place for them, and they can feel that. So you just think creatively of something they could eat, something. Do you hear that? Man, those birds are beautiful. You feel that sunshine? Whew, it's a nice warm day. I feel it on my skin. It feels good. You use language to draw them into feeling, seeing, smelling. That can pull them out of a bad spot. Slow down. We've talked about this. If you see things a couple times, I care about it. And maybe this is because I run 1,000 miles an hour and I need to remember to slow down. If any crisis is happening or somebody's almost in crisis, if somebody's dealing with mental illness, if somebody's dealing with addiction, hurrying is not going to help anything. Slow down. Talk slower. Let them know you care. You're here to help. Let's see what we can do. Back away. Assess your scenario. Slow down. Have a crisis plan in place. We talked about this. Who do you work with? And maybe it shifts. That's a hard part. You're working with somebody today, it's a new person tomorrow. Have a game plan in place that if something happened, which it may never, but if a crisis happened, who stays with the person and who calls 911? Okay? You can call for help. Now, you're not going to do this all the time, but if you felt like, oh no, this person might be violent, I don't know what to do, and this person could have that capacity. They're getting louder, they just pushed over a chair. You're going, I don't know, but this could be bad. Somebody should call 911. And that's, what else are you gonna do? You don't have a lot of options. Counselors don't have a lot of options. So you might have to bring others involved. So one or two are saying, hey, calm down, you're okay. They're trying to use calm language and see what's going on and tell me what's going on and all that. Why don't we go outside? Don't trap yourself. Why don't we go outside and get some cool, fresh air as we talk? Lock the door behind them. No, I have done that once. Get them outside so you have lots of space, But as you're doing that, this person's calling. Okay, so have your game plan in place. That's well worth it. Presume positive intent. So for some reason, some of you may naturally do this, but a lot of people don't. They think, wow, that person must be terrible to talk to me like that. How could he say that? How could she do that? Oh, and we presume they're mean, they're, whatever else that we presume. We could have all kinds of things that we put on them because of how they're talking. It's not for no reason. If you just looked at their language, like, man alive, who would say that to me? I had a gentleman say, I hope you're cursed and your children are cursed. Like, who would do that? And I was pregnant. I'm like, this is the worst person in the world. Like, who would say that out loud? My children are fine. But when people say terrible things, you might have said something terrible once in an argument. These things happen. It really is not about us. So to not take it personal and to presume maybe something else is going on. Now, I have a very real example of this. So in school, somewhere in there, you're learning about cognitive behavior therapy. Everybody probably knows about that at this point, right? Cognitive behavior therapy. Your thinking has a big impact on how you feel and what you do. How you interpret things. If you're thinking like, man, this guy's a jerk, how could he do that? You're gonna feel a certain way, you might do something a certain way. So we're all pretty familiar with this at this point. But at this moment, I'm learning all this, I'm like thinking it through and all this, and I worked at a bank and there's a big long line and everybody's grouchy, but one particular guy is just saying terrible things. It's just rude and mean, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, and I have this in my mind, I'll go, all right, we'll test it out, right? So I go up to him and I say, sir, it seems like you're having a bad day. And he said, yeah, my wife died. That was in El Cajon at a bank, a real story. And I'm just like, okay, I get it. I'm so sorry. Get your check cashed. And it doesn't mean he should be rude. I didn't care. I was not going to judge him. Like, I don't know how I would be. I had no judgment at that point. But I also went, oh my goodness. I could have judged him. I could have been rude back to him, having no idea of the full story. How many times do we do that? If you're going to work with this population, you're going to have a much better experience just presuming positive intent. Okay, probably had a bad day, probably stubbed his toe, probably had a fight with his significant other. It's like probably something else, not me. Let me help you. It just goes better. It doesn't mean you don't protect yourself. It doesn't mean you're not aware of your surroundings, but presume positive intent. Get the story. You are probably talking 95% trauma. If something's happening that's a crisis in front of you, or somebody is saying something mean, or anything like that's happening, probably there's a story. Get the story. It calms people down. They love to share and say what's going on. What brought you here? How's your day been? What's been going on? Where are you at? Are they living on the streets? And they were able to get there, but it took them 5 hours. What has happened that day? What about their story in life? Tell me about yourself. One is it'll de-escalate everything. Now they're a person you're getting to know. They're going to believe you care about them and you're going to help them. So it calms everything down. But what if in their story you can help them better? Not just transaction. Get to know them. Let them tell their story. Tell me what's going on. How was your day? What's it been like lately? What are some important things in your life right now? Do you have anything going on that you're hoping for in the future? Just open it up. Get their story. Give options. Okay? I'm telling you the secrets of counselors here, so you can't use it against them. Okay? Instead of just yes or no, I can't. No, we're not doing that. Yes, instead of that, go, tell you what, which one would be best for you? We can either do this or this or this. All three of those things are things that we want. They might not, but we're directing them. These are our options. Come on over here. They want way over there. Yeah, but here's what we can do. What would you prefer? Even to the point where you say, look, I really want to help you. If you stay here and you can be calm and not yell, I'd love to blah, blah, blah. If you're going to keep yelling, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. Which would be best? You know, you're telling them stop it or go, but you're doing it in a way where they're choosing. You're saying the language so they have options. Okay, so any way you can make it to where they have options, it's going to be beneficial. I'm going to open it up for questions while you have these in back of you, just for time's sake. So I want to hear your questions. These are things that you can take and memorize that are just great phrases to use in situations that might feel a little bit out of control. But what questions do you have so far? And you can have it more specific with what you're dealing with every day. Yes? I think there's wisdom in what you're saying, and what she's describing is a scenario where probably logistically you might not have a ton, and you only have a limited time, and you have a whole lot of people. So 1, 2, 3, go. You have 5 minutes, get what you need, get out. If you've got 5 minutes to get what you need, are you gonna go into fight or flight? Absolutely. So your raw emotions from when you were 2 are coming out on this person next to you instead of your good thinking brain. So I can't pretend like I have an answer for you, because some of the things we have in place are because it's the only thing that would work, but it'd be worth exploring. Put it on a big old whiteboard and get all your ideas out there. Is there a way people could feel calm and like they have plenty of time and they get out quick? You know, so is there another way of approaching it rather than timed? Funny enough, how many people, as soon as you say you have to by this time, you're getting passive-aggressive behavior real quick. Oh, you're telling me? Okay, then. And it's like, I'm going to do 6 minutes. Let's see what you're going to do about it. It's almost like you put that restriction, and you're going to have an amount of people that will just go at you just because that you put that there. So could you have the same thing? Like, hey, we have a limited time. I'd like you to go as quick as you can through, and then test it. I don't know the luxury you have. Sometimes things are in place because they have to be. But if you had the luxury to try it this way, try it this way, try it this way, see, ask them. Hey, we need you in and out in 5 minutes, but we notice that you yell at people when you're in a hurry. Would it be easier if there's no restriction? Yes, it would be easier. Could you go quick? Yes, I would go quick. I just don't want somebody telling me 5 minutes. All right, go for it. Let's see how it works. You know, if you had the luxury to do that, but it's at least worth brainstorming. Other questions? Yes. It's great. Great question. So if you had, 100 people coming in for resources and you have 10 volunteers, but they change all of the time, hopefully you have at least 2 pretty senior people. Because what you could do in that situation is tell every volunteer that comes, hey, if there's a crisis, we're going to want you to move so we can handle it. And they're going to like that. All right. So they're just going to scoot back. The 2 people come forward. One person knows I'm lead in handling whatever's happening. So one person is forward saying, I need you to calm down. Why don't we go over here? The other person is following them because they need to make sure this person's safe. And this person might have to get everybody away if they're really violent. And so what you're doing is either you're getting everybody out and the one person stays, or you're getting the one person out and everybody stays. So you're seeing what goes well. I'm gonna need you to walk with me. Let's go talk. Let's see what's going on. You're not combative. You're gently seeing if you can get them out the door. And then you're going from there. But the second person needs to follow you in case they're calling 911. In case you need to do it quicker than not, because it's gonna take them time to get there. So if there's a real danger and you're gonna have to do the best you can assessing it, you need others involved. Otherwise, they're just following you to kind of make sure you're okay while you're handling it. Everybody else, including other people getting services, and all your volunteers are somewhere else. Okay? Otherwise, you say, hey guys, we're gonna have to take a quick break. We need you to exit over there. We'll open in just a moment. Please exit over there. And you tell your volunteers these 2 things. You're backing off. Listen to what I say. Follow my instructions. All the volunteers start leaving. All the people start leaving. Now you have the 2 that know what they're doing and the 1 person, and you're deciding, how are we going to do this? But you get everybody else out. Does that help give an idea? And then there's 2 things you're telling brand new people each time, and maybe even on a piece of paper so they have an idea of what to do. Other questions? And then if you need to wave me to stop talking, I'll be ready. Yes? Yeah. It works. So PTSD, psychosis, bipolar, it'll work for a lot of things. And that's what you need. It works for me when I'm stressed out. It's like, it just works. A lot of what we're talking about is fight or flight, our sympathetic nervous system. If anybody wants, I've got cards up here, and Feeding San Diego knows me well, of other video trainings. And one of the best things you can do is learn how the fight or flight response works for your own self and those that you're helping. So that's what we're talking about, and that's where the engaging senses could really help. Thank you for sharing. Any other questions? Yes? If you can get to the PERT team, bless you, okay? Normally, you're gonna call 911, and if they're available, PERT will go. But PERT cannot handle all the calls that they really should be at. So police, unfortunately, go when PERT is not available. So if you call 911, they'll send PERT if they have them. And if they're not available, they'll send police. So the point is, act quick before it's too late if you feel like it's really escalating quickly. But PERT, Psychological Emergency Response Team, is fabulous. Cops are cops. Thank goodness they're there. But, like, all right, well, let's figure this out and handle it quick. And the PERT's going to be real gracious in dealing with the mental illness. Now, I have to say the police have been well more trained than they ever have before to deal with mental illness differently and compassionately. They still walk in looking like a police officer. So you can have 1 or 2 things. You can have people be on their best behavior real quick. I've had psychotic, they're very, very psychotic. The police walk in, yes, sir, I don't know what she's talking about. I am fine, I'm not seeing things. How'd that happen? And then you also have people traumatized and fall apart because police walk in. So it's just we don't have a lot of options. We can't physically manage a violent person. It's just not going to be what I believe. You talk to your boss, whoever's over you in authority, talk to them. But I doubt anybody at Feeding San Diego is going to want you to deal with a violent situation. So who do you get involved? Talk to your leadership about the process that they may already have in place. Are we done? Where are we at? Are we good on time? Yep. Wonderful. I'm available if anybody wants to take a card or ask me questions or come see me in another location. I'd love to be a resource. Thank you, everyone.